this time of Bible study. We're starting a new study tonight, and it will be a rather long one because our objective will be to do a survey through all of the Old Testament. Now, a survey, of course, is a survey, and so it's not as in-depth as you might do if you were taking one book, for instance, and diving in depth. But I've always believed, and I think many of you will agree with me, hopefully you all will, that having a good overview understanding of the Old Testament is just so very critical. In fact, there's a lot of things about the New Testament that you just won't grasp if you don't have a good working knowledge of the Old Testament. From time to time, you hear people say, I don't know why we're wasting time in the Old Testament. We're not under that law anymore. I don't see why we have to spend time studying the Old Testament. Well, those people are short-sighted. It is very important to study and understand the truths of the Old Testament. I think it's really important to understand the chronology of the Old Testament, the way things lined out, how they happened, and in what chronological order they happened. I think it is very valuable. We haven't studied in the Old Testament for a while, and so I made the determination for this class it would be good for us to do that again. And we've done Old Testament surveys before, but again, it always lends to good discussion and hopefully very valuable reminders to us about things in the Word of God. So where do we start? Obviously we start at the beginning, right? Genesis 1. And so Genesis 1 lines out the creation, what we call the creation week, the 7 days of, actually 6 days of creation and God resting on the seventh day. And the order in which the things were created is important to understand and establish. Unfortunately, there's a lot of false teaching about Genesis 1. It's just, I think you almost have to have help to misunderstand Genesis 1, or you have to have some kind of an agenda. You have to have some reason to not take it the way it's stated, to not take it at face value. You almost have to have, you've got to be trying to force something into the text. And what that is, for lots of people, they're trying to force what modern science says into Genesis 1, and they're not compatible. Genesis 1 and the claims of modern science, they cannot be harmonized, and you're on a losing path if you try to accomplish that. It just can't be done. We need to take the word here at face value and understand it. So let's try that. Let's do that. And we'll just read a few verses and comment as God creates all things here in Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. All right, again, these are very familiar verses to us. But the first thing that God made, God created the heavens and the earth, and he created light on day one. So God created the material universe. There's a Latin expression that we use when we describe God's creative work, and that Latin expression, we're not Latin students, but the Latin expression is ex nihilo, out of nothing. And so it's important for us to understand that that's what God did. He created all things out of nothing. You know, it wasn't like, well, there was this kind of glob here, and God kind of took that glob and he just refashioned it and put it into the current existing state. That's not true. God created all the physical universe out of nothing. There was nothing, and God spoke, and there was something. And that just, you can't grasp that. I just know that our feeble little human pea brains cannot grasp the infinite power of God, that he has that kind of power to speak things into existence. That's really incredible. And again, I think we're not even really able to grasp that. But God created all things out of nothing. He created light. But I want you to notice something. We'll talk about this more when we get to day 4. On day 4, he created the sun, the moon, and the stars. on day 4, he created the light sources, but he created light before he created the light sources. I want to hold on to that till we get to day 4, but I think there's some significance to that. Wade?
In this first day, just like you said, he made the universe. But it's like he made the world, and then he started adding to it. Because notice, he talks about the waters, how the Spirit was over the surface of the waters. So you know the waters he had to have made on day 1 as well.
Yeah.
And then he talks about how he does things to the waters later on.
Yeah, and the significant phrase there in verse 2, the earth was without form and void. So it was here, but as you say, he's going to engineer it here in these days of creation. Okay, so day 2, verse 6. Now, before we leave day 1, I want you to notice that a day is defined right there, right? So God said, verse 3, let there be light. He saw the light, it was good. God divided the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. A period of light followed by a period of darkness was a day. Right? So the text here defines a day for us. Now there's some people who want to quibble about the days, that maybe the days weren't really days, that the days were actually long eons. This is figurative language. And the days were actually long eons of time. They're just called a day in a figurative sense. You know, the Bible does use the word day sometimes in a figurative sense. For instance, the day of the Lord. You know, sometimes expressions like that are used to not denote a literal day, but more of a concept or a period. Not here. The word day comes from the Hebrew word yom. If you're going to spell it with English letters, be Y-O-M. And every time that you find that word with a numeral, in other words, first day, second day, third, anytime you find that word in the Hebrew text with a quantitative number associated with it, it's always to be taken literally. It always is literal, every place where it's found. This is a literal day. It's a period of light followed by a period of darkness. And the text calls that a day. That was the first day. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Eric.
But it's the evening and the morning the first day, rather than the morning and the evening. So was that like a Jewish calendar?
I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that. Wayne?
Yeah, that is the way the Jews reckon time. They reckon time from evening, from sunset to sunrise.
Yeah.
That's the Jewish day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it makes sense that he would write, Moses would write as a Jew in the Jewish day.
So who are we to change that?
Huh?
Who are we to change
Yeah. Good point. I hadn't even thought about that. Good point, Eric. Yeah.
That word is Elohim, it's in the plural form of God.
Yeah.
God created.
God. So it's a plural noun, and so how could it be plural? Well, the text actually says that the Spirit of God moved on the face of the earth. There's another being in the Godhead. We know from John 1:1 that Jesus was involved. In the beginning, the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him. Jesus was it. So the Godhead. This is the Godhead, what we refer to as the three-person Godhead involved in creation. Good point. All right, now.
In verse 26
Yeah.
of chapter 1, let us make man. God said, let us make man.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Okay, so we got day 1, and the significant, of course, very significant. I mean, he created the physical universe, and he created light, divided the light and the darkness, set into motion. This actually suggests that he set into motion time, right? Now time is being measured. The morning and the evening and the morning were the first day. And that, we have the element of time introduced into creation here. Verse 6, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. All right, so the firmament, what's the firmament? What would we call it? The sky, the atmosphere, right? The establishment of Earth's atmosphere here and the dividing of waters below the firmament, that would be surface waters on the earth, right? From waters that were above the firmament. Now, we won't talk too much about that right here. In a few weeks, when we get to Noah and the flood, I want you to remember this element, because this is not just, well, we got water in the clouds, thunderstorm rolls in and water comes out of the clouds. This is more than that. This is not just talking about water in the clouds. This is talking about some reservoir of water that was above the atmosphere of the earth, right? This wasn't clouds floating through the atmosphere. This was water that was above the atmosphere of the earth. We're going to chase a lot of rabbits if we're not careful, but I just want you to remember that statement, because I think it's really critical when we get to talking about Noah's flood, when we get to chapter 6. Okay, so water, he made Earth's atmosphere, separated water, surface water on the earth from water that was above the atmosphere. That was day 2. Day 3, verse 9. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God, let's keep reading. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the third day. Okay, so on the third day, dry land was separated from bodies of water. Dry land and oceans or seas were divided on day 3. Very significant, of course. Also, grass, herb, and fruit trees were created on that day. Now, there's a very important law of biology that is established right here on day 3 of the creation week. Living things produce after their kind. Did you notice how often that's repeated there in verse 11 and 12? The plant life that's created here produces after its kind. Life produces after its own kind. Right here is one of the statements that's so important when we get into a discussion of evolution. Because evolution requires that life does not produce after its own kind. Because evolution, as you well know, suggests that at some point in the ancient past, there was nothing living on planet Earth. But in some process that we're not able to describe or duplicate, even under best laboratory conditions, in some way, a bit of energy acted on a particle of matter, and a single cell of life sprang into existence. Life from non-living matter, evolution depends upon that. Can't be done, never has been done, can't be duplicated. Life comes from non-living matter. Now, God did it, because God is the Almighty God, but there's no natural process whereby life comes from non-living matter. And then the follow-up to that evolution requires is that living things did not produce after their kind. That living things began to change and mutate, and variants developed, and new species generated, Life did not always produce after its kind. Wade.
Another principle that we're seeing here too is how this was all intention, how he made this in a process. Because when we get to day 6, when he's making the humans and the animals and stuff, they have to have food. And so here we are on day 3, where he's already making the vegetation to sustain the rest of the life that he's fixing to make.
Yeah, okay, good. I think that's good. So again, if for those who want to try to force a harmony of modern false science with what the Bible teaches, you got a big problem here, because the false theory of evolution requires that life generates from non-life and that living things do not produce after their own kind. They produce different kinds. I mean, I don't even think men can even give a number right now to all the different kind of life forms that exist on planet Earth. The number is inconceivably great. And there's fewer now than there were centuries ago, because different species become extinct over time. But there's still just an unimaginable number of different life forms. And they all supposedly came from that first instance when a single cell came to life. Non-living matter came to life in a single cell moment. And then through all the eons of time, that has evolved. And new kinds have evolved out of that original life form. It can't be duplicated. It's never been explained, but we're supposed to believe that. Now, of course, remember that there's 2 kinds of evolution. There's what's called specific evolution, evolution within a species. We believe that happens. That's easily documented, right? That for instance, if you wanted to take a mouse, start with just a regular garden variety mouse, and then you wanted to make a mouse with a much longer tail and almost zero, just tiny little short ears, no ears. Could you do that? Well, you could, right? And mice are pretty neat to deal with because you can study several generations in short order. They reproduce so rapidly. And so you could, over time, you could develop a strain of mice by selective breeding. You could develop a strain of mice that had real long tails and almost no ears at all. But you know what they'd be? They'd still be mice. So you can get a variation. You can get an evolution, if you will, within a species. That's called specific evolution. General evolution, though, we believe that. And so one of the things we have to be careful with, people say, oh, you Christians, you're just silly. We know that evolution happens. You can see evolution happening. Well, they're talking about specific evolution within a species, and we do not deny it. And so it's very important for us when we're talking with them to make sure they understand what we're talking about. When we say evolution is not true, we're talking about the general theory of evolution that says that you had that single cell life form that mysteriously and unexplainably came to be, and then it evolved into all the myriad of species that exist on planet Earth today. We don't believe that. That's what we don't believe. And it's not provable, and there's no evidence of it. A lot of people have said, and I think it's a true statement, you have to have more faith to believe in the general theory of evolution than you do to have to believe in an all-powerful God who created everything. There's no evidence for that. But here on day 3, we've got the first living things on earth. We've got the grass, the herb, the fruit, bearing after their own kind. Let's go to day 4, verse 14. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. And he made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. So, day 4, sun and moon and stars were created. Now, how is this so? Because you know what I believe, and I think we agree. The creation days were 6 literal, consecutive 24-hour days. If we add up all the time that the Bible allows since creation until now, it's about 6,000 years. If you want to stretch it, somebody, well, we don't know about all those genealogies. There might be some gaps in those genealogies. There's not much. But if we were to grant, that you could stretch that a little, the earth is less than 10,000 years old. More on the order of 6,000, but let's just be generous. Let's say 10,000 years old. When I go out tonight and look up into the sky, I'm going to see a star out there, and they tell me that star is 10 million light years from Earth. Now, you understand a light year is how far light travels in a year, right? And so I'm seeing that star, and it takes the light from that star 10 million years to come to my eye. How can the Earth and the physical universe be so young if I'm seeing that star? The fact that I'm seeing that star that's 10 million light years away, surely, they argue, that means that the universe is that old. You guys are wrong. You guys, when you teach a young Earth, you are wrong because we can see those stars. How are you going to answer that? Okay. There is, and I've been reading some recently, the time as we measure it on our watches may not be the same in space. Grant could probably fill us in on that.
The other way I would comment, he created the full system. Why could he have not created the star with the light already there?
That's what I think is the best answer. And that's why I was wanting you to pay attention there on day one. He created light before he created the light sources. So why is it a stretch of our imagination to believe God created the star and he created all the light that existed between here and there? And by the way, we don't know. The measured distances in the physical universe, it's almost impossible to measure them with any accuracy. You know how they measure distances? They call it triangulation, right? And so you go back to your high school geometry and you get a triangle here. And if you know the distance between the two endpoints down here, you can measure how far it is out there to that point. So you got 2 points and you're measuring to a third up here, and you triangulate. Well, the problem with trying to triangulate the distance of the stars is that this distance down here on Earth is so minuscule compared to the distance to that star that it makes that kind of calculation practically impossible. I mean, for all intents, it is impossible. There's no accuracy involved in it at all. But I'm not even willing to argue that point. I'm just saying, and I think Grant's got it right. He created the whole system in place. He created. Hang on to this till we get to the creation of man. But he created a mature universe from the get-go. Dan.
The miracles that Jesus performed where he fed the multitude from just a handful of fish. When those scraps are taken up, if they carry those scraps to a scientist at that time or even today, they ask the question, how long would you say, or how old would you say that fish is? Well, they'll say, well, that particular fish breed takes 10 years to get to that size. That fish wasn't 10 years old.
Or even if it takes 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he created
he fed them with full-grown fish.
Yeah.
Full-size fish.
And I think that's a very key explanation to all of this, is that in this creation, God created things in their mature state. So again, don't be thrown off by that, because that question will get tossed up to us from time to time. Well, how in the world can we see the distant stars if the universe is as young as you say it is? Well, because we believe God created it so. All right, quickly moving on, verse 20. Yes. Oh, Wayne. Wait, I had it right first. Wade, go ahead, Wade.
This is just kind of just an interesting point. The Hebrew word for heavens is shamayim. So the Jews had 3 different heavens, right? Well, the word for water is mayim. And so I thought it was interesting how the word for water is in the word for heaven, shamayim, mayim. And so you can see that the first heaven is the clouds, right?
First heaven is the air we breathe. The second heaven is where the stars are.
Yeah. But the first heaven is where the clouds and where
Our atmosphere.
the water stays
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that area.
Yeah. So the scriptures even do mention the third heaven. So there's the heaven of our atmosphere. There's the heaven of the stars and planets. The third heaven is the spiritual realm where God exists. Yeah.
Because when it says in the beginning, God created, I believe the heavens and the earth were created complete, and you basically said that, in the period called the beginning, which was before the first celestial day. So, I mean, I'm including everything in the heavens and the earth, including the stars.
I don't know about that. I'll have to study. You have to study with me about that, because it says there in verse 14, God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven." God made 2 great lights, verse 16. And God set them in the firmament of heaven to give light. So it seems like he made the sun, moon, and stars. Okay, we can talk about that, but it seems like that was a day 4 event, as far as I can understand. We'll talk more about that. Okay, let's look at verse 20. God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply upon the earth." And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. All right. So water creatures and fowls of the air created on day 5. So there's something here that I think is also interesting. Again, so understand that there's this, we call it theistic evolution. The people who teach theistic evolution believe that God set the evolutionary process in motion. God used evolution to produce what we have. And so you can see it in that expression, theistic of God. Theistic evolution. God used evolution to bring the process to be. But still, it took a long, long time. Evolution takes a long time. Everybody knows that, right? Evolution doesn't happen overnight. Evolution takes, if it happens over long. That's why the evolutionists must demand an ancient universe and an ancient earth. If evolution is true, then we got to have a lot of time for it to happen. And so one of the ways they do it is to say, and you probably have heard of this, you should have heard of this, because we've talked about it before, the so-called day-age theory. That the days of Genesis 1 were not regular days. The days were actually long, long eons of time. And so that's how they can try to get more time into Genesis 1, by saying the days weren't actual real days. Well, test that concept against one thing here. When were the insects made? I'm gonna kind of equivocate on that. It may be day 5. It could be day 6, because verse 24, which begins day 6, God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle, creeping thing, beast of the earth, and his kind." It was so. So he never mentions the bugs exactly. So I'd be willing if you want, I'd be willing to let it be on day 5 or 6. It doesn't matter to me. It could be, I'm not sure where it most accurately fits. But here's the issue. He made the plant life on day 3. And you know that one of the things that plant life depends upon is insects, right? Pollinators. A lot of the fruit trees, in order to be able to produce after their kind, and he said that there on day 3, that the fruit tree bearing fruit after its kind. In order for a lot of plants to be able to produce their seeds to repopulate, they have to have pollinators. Well, he didn't make the pollinators on day 3. He made the pollinators either on day 5 or 6. So if day 3 was eons of time, day 4 was eons of time, day 5 was eons of time. We got those poor trees there waiting. We got to have some pollinators flying around here. We need some bees to come in here and pollinate these. We don't have any. I'm sorry, you don't have any. So we're going to believe then that these fruit trees were just sitting there for eons of time, not able to produce fruit and seed until day 5 or day 6. It doesn't work, does it? It simply doesn't work. Sarah?
Because if you have eon days, then you're going to have eon nights, and nothing can live in an eon night. And also, in Jeremiah 33, verse 19, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, saying, Thus says the Lord, if you can break my covenant for the day and my covenant for the night, so that the day and night shall not be at their appointed time, then my covenant may also be broken with David my servant. God had a covenant with the day and the night, and it's not going to be broken.
That's right. And that's why, going way back there to our initial comments, it's important for us to grasp that he defined a day. A period of light followed by a period of darkness was a day. And so if like you said, if we're going to believe that the days were eons of time, then they had to be eons of light followed by eons of darkness. Well, plant life can't live like that. And so the day-age theory just does not work. It cannot fit this text at all. Wait. What was your Jeremiah scripture? Jeremiah 33:19. Okay, thank you. So again, don't try to force. Don't feel compelled, and I think our young people especially need to be encouraged to. Don't feel some kind of absolute necessity of trying to harmonize Genesis 1 with the false claims of the theory of evolution. They don't fit. They can't be mashed together. They don't work. And some notable evolutionists have actually said that. They said you can't harmonize the two. One is true and the other is not. But they're not both true. They can't both be true. They just can't be. All right. So then that brings us to day 6, verse 24. And God said, Let the earth bring forth a living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing. God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the 6th day. All right, it's already been pointed out in verse 26 that God said, Let us make man in our image. We've got plural pronouns there. Us, our. How is that so? I remember one guy said, did God have a mouse in his pocket? Or who was he talking to here? Well, obviously he was talking to the other God the Father speaking to God the Son and God the Holy Spirit. And so this, we see all three beings of the Godhead here involved in creation. What does it mean that we are made in God's image? What does it mean? Well, God's just about this tall, and he's got 2 eyes and a nose and a mouth and ears and hands. That's not it. Huh? God is a spirit. God doesn't have a physical body. And that's the key. To be made in God's image is to have a spirit, to have an eternal spirit. That there's nothing else in creation that has an eternal spirit. And that's what sets man apart from all the rest of creation. So, your dear pet dog that you've loved forever, I'm going to see my dog in heaven. No, your dog doesn't have an eternal spirit. You may love your dog, that's fine, but he's not going to go to heaven because he's not made in the image of God. He doesn't have an eternal spirit. That's what makes us different from all the rest of creation. Here, in verse 28 especially, here's one of the places that, and some of you commented about this, and verse 28 is where you can really see this. God created a mature creation. I like to ask this question. How old was Adam 10 seconds after God made him? He's 10 seconds old. He was 10 seconds old. What was the first thing God told him to do? Be fruitful and multiply. God created Adam and Eve as full-grown human beings. Now that's, somebody says, oh yeah, well, that's God, that's deceptive. No, there's no deception involved in it. It's plainly stated there. I think that also answers some other questions, probably not critical to our discussion here, but for instance, where did all the oil and gas and coal that are in the earth, where did they come from? Some of that may have been generated in Noah's flood. I'll give credit to that. But what about, so if you got coal, and they tell us that if you would compress that coal under intense heat and pressure for a long time, you get a diamond, right? So there's diamonds. There are diamonds. So that means, somebody argues, that means that coal had to exist and then be compressed for long periods of time before coal could turn into diamonds. I don't think so. I'm willing to believe that God created all of those things in place, a mature creation, because God could see that we would be able to ultimately discover and use those things to our advantage. Now, I'm willing to grant that I think some of the oil and gas very, very possibly could have resulted from some of the events around Noah's flood. I'm not discounting that. But I do believe that God created a mature creation in all respects. It didn't have to evolve over time. Thoughts or comments? Wait.
So in Joshua 10, verse 14, it says, there has been no day like it before or since when the Lord listened to the voice of man, because the Lord fought for Israel.
When he had the sun move back 10 degrees.
Yeah. And so I think
Is that the event you're talking about there?
Yeah, I think the point of that, yeah, Joshua's long day. The point of that was that's never happened before.
A longer day like that had never happened before.
Yeah, so you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the day-age theory could work according to that verse anyways, because that verse said that's never been done before.
Okay, interesting. Sarah?
One principle that really throws the loop in everything evolution-wise is the law that things are irreducibly complex.
Yeah.
Like the heart or the eye, even the simple cell cannot function unless it's complete.
Yeah.
And it's all there. And if evolution happened, then it would not all be present at the same time and work.
Exactly right. this argument has really been expounded, I guess, upon in recent years. There was a guy named Michael Behe. He wrote a book called Darwin's Black Box, and he really developed this, irreducible complexity. So, just go to the simplest. Go to the simplest. So, any mating pair of animals, or man and woman, the man and the woman would have had to evolve with their different parts simultaneously and reach maturity at the same time, right? What's the chances of that? But like you say, with the eye. So here's a very primitive life form that's going to ultimately become a human, and it evolves an optical nerve, but there's nothing to connect that to. All the rest of the eye, very, very complex, intricate functionings of that's not there yet. The optic nerve has evolved, but there's nothing to connect to yet. So what does evolution say is going to happen to that nerve? It's going to be discarded because it's useless, right? Now the eye comes along and there's no optic nerve connected. The whole thing it just doesn't work. Tim?
Diamonds aren't, I've never heard of a diamond being found in a coal mine.
Yeah. Yeah. But diamonds are carbon.
Right.
Diamonds are carbon and coal is carbon. And so the argument is made that if you compress that carbonous coal long enough and hard enough, under enough heat and pressure, you could make a diamond out of it. I think I told you a few months ago, there was a story where some schoolboys had heard that, and so they decided they'd try it, and they took a piece of charcoal, and they put it in the oven and tried to, no, they put it in a pressure cooker. They put it in a pressure cooker and cranked it up full blast, and they actually sealed the vent hole so it couldn't vent out, because they wanted to really build the pressure up, because they were going to make a diamond out of this piece of charcoal. And you know what happened, of course. It exploded the pressure cooker. Luckily, nobody got hurt. But they were determined that they could make a diamond that way. Dan?
Something I will tell you, those lab-grown diamonds, they have to start with a slice or a sliver or a fragment of an actual diamond, or another lab-grown diamond. But they literally start off with thin little wafers, and then they grow it on top of that.
Okay.
They don't take coal.
So they actually start. So they actually start with the molecular structure of a diamond.
Yeah, they already start with existing diamonds, and then they grow diamond material on top of that as well.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. So there's so much here. There's just so much here. The dominion of humans is expressed there. In verse 20, I've given you dominion over all these living things. So, I don't know about this. Is it right to kill a cow and eat it? I mean, what right do I have to raise a cow and then ultimately slaughter it and eat its meat? Well, I have dominion over it. I'm a human. Humans have dominion over the other elements of creation. It's not improper. But notice, there's something here. He didn't give men cow meat to eat here in Creation Week. So what did he give man and every other living thing? What did he give them to eat? In verse 29, he speaks of herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat, and to every beast of the earth, to every fowl of the air, to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was, men were not meat eaters until after the flood. When we get to the aftermath of Noah's flood, we'll read where God authorized men to consume meat. But before that, no. Sarah?
The time after the flood, put the fear of man in the animals.
That's
So
right.
it's curious what the earth would have been like before if animals were not afraid of them.
Yeah, you could walk right up to a lion and pet it, maybe. I don't know. But after the flood, he did put the fear of man into the wild animals. All right, very interesting. Well, obviously, we didn't get through with lesson 1, but all of that is just so important. And I think we need to be well educated about these particulars and help our kids to be well educated, because their faith is challenged in regards to these things just constantly. So thanks for the good discussion. We'll continue there next week. We basically just got through the 7 days, and then we've got a few follow-up questions about the Genesis 1 before we move on. Thanks, everybody.